at that. 9% of organisations have said they have a strategy around innovation, whereas 87% have said that they see employee engagement outcomes as a result of innovation. And we know that employee engagement has a massive impact on productivity. And right now in our world today, we have probably seen one of the biggest inflection points, without question. We've seen one of the biggest inflection points ever. And hence we are probably going to see an impact on productivity in the following months. And certainly when we look back at the data, I think that we'll see that as evident across the economy. So for me, it's very clear that innovation has these significant outcomes: productivity, employee engagement, clients, talent, operational efficiency. And yet, as Richard alluded to at the end, the last question talked about how many people manage innovation in a precise and defined way. And again, that was incredibly low. So there were some high scores in there about the value that people felt they got when innovation took place, but there's no strategy. 91% of firms don't have a defined strategy, whilst 87% of firms are saying that there are employee engagement outcomes that lead to productivity, and that managed innovation is taking place in very few areas. So for me, that's a very clear set of 3 indicators that I would start to focus on if I worked in an organisation which didn't have an innovation strategy and that didn't have a managed way to look at innovation. So just going on a little bit to the 3 points that I wanted to share with you today. As Richard said, I've worked in this space for a long time and also in the space of knowledge management. I mean, when I go and talk to organisations, what I find often is you say to them, what does innovation mean for you? It's a really exciting word. It's a word that was bandied around before this point of inflection, which is now my favourite way to describe what we're going through. Isabel Parker used it, and I really, really like it as a word. It's a word that everybody says frequently, but what does it actually mean? So I think sometimes you have to sit and look at your own organisation and think, how would I define innovation for my people, for my organisation, for my clients? How would I actually say what innovation means to us and the trajectory we're going to go on? Now, you can call that a strategy, you can call it a vision, you can call it whatever you want, but fundamentally, actually defining what innovation means for you is really, really key. That could be continuous improvement. That's a way of innovation that typically will hit your operating cost. It could be incremental innovation, where you do small things on a project or a client project basis so that you improve the way you do something piece by piece. It can be breakthrough innovation, and that's where you start to talk about these big changes in your service provision, these business model changes. And when people talk about digital transformation, sometimes people will say to me, what does that actually mean? You know, what is digital innovation? What is digital transformation? So it's actually changing the business model of how you do it. And lots of people will use the Uber example. And the way that I describe that for people is they didn't invent the car, they didn't invent the taxi driver, they didn't invent the passenger, and they didn't invent the internet, but they brought it all together in a totally different business model. So innovation doesn't have to be about inventing the next amazing thing. It can be about how you mold what you already have available to you in a different business model. And that would really be a breakthrough stage in a very different way of looking at innovation. And depending on the ambition of your firm, your organisation, that can define innovation for you. You don't have to start at the end. You can start at the beginning. Just start with continuous improvements or incremental steps. So the second point I wanted to mention today was about adaption. The world has adapted in a way that none of us would have predicted 6 months ago. We would have all been sitting there saying, we can't do that, that's impossible, this is really hard. But actually, all of us have adapted, and we have seen technology adoption, particularly of these types of tools, you know, video and virtual connection, go through the roof. But what's the next stage of adaption, and what does that look like? And so for me, in the last few weeks, I've been starting to look at, you know, what are the features that are going to be present in the business recovery and the adaption that organisations are going to have to engage in to take full advantage of the new paradigm and where we're moving to. And so there are a few things that came out there for me that step into that innovation space, and they're around immersivity. And that's a word that I use cautiously because it sounds like what's everybody talking about, but it's that connection between the virtual world and our culture, and around how we make use of our knowledge assets in our business to drive business transformation and digital transformation moving forward, and around how we adapt our culture and that we make sure we really understand that moving forward in this new world, which will forevermore, in my view, be blended. And so I have to stop there, but hopefully I've triggered a few thoughts for people on things they can think about.